Good evening and welcome to the Offer Accepted Show. My name is Jon Taylor and I'm so excited to have you here this evening. Tonight's episode is Buyers 101 Part 2. A couple of months ago we did an episode called Buyers 101 where we went through every step of buying a home, from thinking about buying a home to getting the keys in your hand and getting your offer accepted. In tonight's episode, we're going to review some of the important tips that we need to remember, especially in this highly energized market. The market's shifting. More houses are on the market. There's a greater inventory. More houses are being built because the lumber costs are coming down. And there's more opportunity for you because people are listing their house. And there's a lot of people who are reducing that price by quite a bit. So let's get started with Missy on Buyers 101 Part 2 and discuss how you can get your offer accepted. In episode number 3, we had an episode called Buyers 101, and we went through everything that people needed to know, from thinking about buying a house to getting the keys in their hand, having a barbecue, and enjoying their new home, right? Yes.
Buyers 101.
Buyers 101. I think we need to follow it up with a Buyers 101 Part 2, the deuce, for what to consider when you're buying a home. As a buyer, what are some key elements that you should decide on or maybe think about even before you start looking?
Yeah, it's very important to do your homework ahead of time, as we mentioned on these shows a lot. Key things, first of all, neighborhood, location, and layout. So you can change the carpet, the paint, everything else. You cannot change your location, and you cannot change your layout, well, very easily. Some layout. So number one, location and layout. Okay, big rule. Secondly, have a budget. Just because the lender says you can have a $300,000 house doesn't mean that's what you should do. Make sure you're budgeting, figure out what payment you can afford, what tax you can afford on top of it. Those all come into play. And
really with your lender, you can look at your tax, your total payment, and what the interest rate is for that whole full monthly payment.
What are the interest rates?
Yeah, PMI, all of those things. And Kris is going to talk a little bit more about that. So the first thing is understand your location. And as a real estate, as the buyer's agent, you're not allowed to tell people about the crime rate or the neighborhood. But you can tell them if it's going to comp out correctly, right?
Yes, as an agent, a lot of people don't understand that I cannot tell them what's the crime rate, what is the school system. I refer them to different websites. They need to kind of do their own homework. I'm giving you a few now. Greatschools.org is a really good resource for people with kids looking for a great school district. Secondly, crime rates. I can't give you a crime rate. So I have a couple of websites for that. One is areavibes.org. That actually does a great overview of retail, offices, industry in the area, schools in the area. Just gives you, the vibe of the whole neighborhood.
And in addition, could somebody just go to the neighborhood and go for a walk, maybe meet the neighbors, go to the grocery store?
Yes, exactly. And I recommend doing that like on a Saturday or Sunday. More people are around. See how many kids are around. If you're concerned about kids or no kids in the area, are people out walking their dogs? Is everyone keeping their grass nice and mowed? Does it look like the neighbors talk to each other? Different things you can find out just by driving by or stopping in and saying hi.
That's a great point. I lived in River West, and we got a house there before we knew the neighborhood. And what I didn't realize is that everybody in the 3-block area that I lived in did not go out of their house ever. And so they all stayed in. So it was this very isolated, closed neighborhood.
And if you like that, that's okay.
That's perfect. I don't like that. I love my neighborhood now, and everybody's out, and they're always talking to each other, and they come greet you when you move in, and bring you donuts. It's wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah. I got a donut neighborhood. I know when we're talking about what to consider when buying a home, is there a strategy or looking to the future goals, 5-year plan? How should we factor that into buying our home?
Right. Even when the prices are high, like they have been this year, you still need to think about your exit strategy. Are you overspending? Are you, overbuying what you don't need right now? Always have an exit strategy. And that's important to work with your buyer's agent that you know the values in the area, that you're asking her or him about the values, and do you think this market or this neighborhood's going to go up in value? Do you see it going down? Just great conversations to have with your buyer's agent.
That's a very good point, and I don't think that people spend enough time looking at their exit strategy or their 5 or 10-year plan when buying a home, and that's, I think, such a good point. Do you have anything that they can use as like a guideline for the square footage or bedrooms or price per square foot, anything like that?
Well, in general, things are going for like 150 to 200 for resale homes, closer to 300 with the new construction, price per square foot, that is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so dependent on the area. Are you in the Waukesha County, Milwaukee County, Ozaukee County? I mean, it depends on where you're at. Again, another great conversation to have with your buyer's agent, which leads into other things that you need to decide before going and looking, like how many bedrooms do you need? Are you single and maybe you only need 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms? Do you have 4 kids or plan on having kids in the next 5 years? Again, with the exit strategy, is that house going to fit you for the next several years?
Yeah.
All things to consider. Bathrooms, are you okay with 1 bathroom or do you need a couple? Garage. I had some buyers, like, really important to have a nice big garage. They do, work on their car or have a workshop, and they just really would like a big garage. So all things that you need to think about before going out and looking.
When we're looking at a home, what are some of the defects, now that we have our planning stage done and we're actually looking at that home, what are some of the defects or cosmetic details that we can overlook, or what should we be concerned about?
So you should definitely think about that and talk with your significant other if you're purchasing with someone else. What can you deal with and what can you not deal with? Old carpet, weird colors on the walls. Are you okay with fixing a couple minor things, putting in new appliances? All things to talk to your buyer's agent about as well. Like, do you want it move-in ready, turnkey, or are you okay fixing up a few things? All important things to consider. Also, when you're walking through homes, sometimes you need to look at little defects. Is there water stains under the kitchen sink? Is there cracks in the basement wall? And make sure your buyer's agent's well-versed in it, like I am. Well, you can know when a crack is an okay crack and when a crack's a bad crack, and you got to get the experts in. It's
important to have good buyer's representation so that you get the home of your dreams, you get that great house that you're looking for, and it doesn't have any defects that are going to really come back to haunt you down the road.
Well, another reason to have home inspection, too.
Yeah, you need that home inspection.
Yes.
So what are some good websites? You mentioned a few. Let's recap what those are so that people have good resources to find that good neighborhood, find crime rates, schools, all those different things.
Yeah, there's a lot of great ones out there. I'm just giving you a couple. I mean, go on and Google, good schools, neighborhood crime rates, Milwaukee, Waukesha, wherever you're looking. But these are just a couple. Like I mentioned before, greatschools.org is good for the school rankings, and it's pretty accurate. Like, whenever I've been in the schools with my kids, they all are striving to have a great rating on great schools. So that's the one that they really like. Areavibes.com, that's, like I said before, talks about the neighborhood, crime rates, things to do, all that kind of things. And the last one was the Family Watchdog. Now that one is more about sexual predators in your area, if you're trying to find out if you're moving next to it, which is important to some people, not important to others. So just a few websites you can try.
Those are very useful, and when people are out there looking for their home and they want to get their offer accepted, it all starts with having a good plan and doing the research. Missy, I would love to hear a success story of somebody getting their offer accepted.
Love sharing success stories with you, John. This one's a little different. It was actually during the pandemic. A good friend of mine who had a hair salon she was renting, her name's Karen, and she needed to get out of the space she was in because they were selling the building from her. So we found her, my husband Kris and I found her a building that needed renovation. So being that he's a general contractor and I'm a realtor, we worked together to get her building of her dreams. So I did include some pictures of the process. It was a long process. It took us probably 6 months, start to finish. But she has a beautiful salon in downtown Waukesha now. Karen for Hair is the name of the business. And if we feel like we really helped someone that was going to be out of a place in the middle of a pandemic, where are you going to go? So we got it opened last July. She was back in there servicing her customers, and things are going great for her.
That is such a great story. I love the way that you and Kris have so many resources to help people sell their home, buy a home, or even renovate it. It's really useful. Buyers 101 Part 2. If you remember back in episode 3, we talked about what you need to do to be successful to purchase a home. We went in great detail from thinking about buying a home to getting the keys, having a barbecue, and enjoying that new palace that you just purchased. We need to follow up on it, though. I think there's more information that we get some questions from our listeners, and we really want to address some key points of being successful, especially with this dynamic market and things are changing. 2-3 months ago, things are much different than they are right now. What's the number one thing that we can do to be prepared, Buyers 101, to getting our offer accepted and being successful in purchasing a home?
I go back to my famous word is the budget. Know what's coming in and know what's going out. But I want to take this one step further, because if you take a look at our back episodes, we kind of went through the nuts and bolts as far as when he started it. But what I want to focus today on, as far as looking deep into the future, you're like, Kris, what do you mean by that? What affects your budget more coming in the future? Such as, is there going to be a change in job? Is there going to be a change in income? Are we going to have babies? Are you going to have hobbies that are going to cost a lot of money? And new vehicle purchase. All those items come into consideration as far as that's going to hit your monthly budget. And you want to make sure that you at least think about it, that you prepare yourself for it.
When we talk about budget, is there things we should consider? Should we consider our coffee? I know that, when you talk to financial people, they're like, don't go to Starbucks, or it's go to Starbucks. What's the ruling on Starbucks? Can we go or not?
It's all about your budget. What do you feel comfortable with? Can you afford that $4, $5, $6 a day or a week? Take a look at it ahead of time. And then if this is something that you absolutely need, fit it into your budget so you're able to enjoy those things. Because at the end of the day, we're creatures of habit. We want to have what we want to have. And who am I, or who are you, or anybody to say that you can't have it at all? Make sure you can afford it. That's the biggest thing.
I think if you're honest about your situation and you look at your budget, you look at everything and you really put the effort into doing a really good budget and thinking about, the Netflix and all of those. I just went through and canceled subscriptions, and it was a few $100s a month of stuff that I really don't use. So there's a lot of things out there. And I think when doing a budget, we think of car payment, insurance, but we don't think of the Netflix and the Hulu. Let's talk a little bit more about the big items and versus the little items. The big items are easy. The little items, should we lump those in, or what's a good way to budget those?
No, it's taking a look over the last maybe 3 to 6 months and see, where are you spending your money on? Start making columns, start making lists as far as, okay, I went to the coffee shop how many times this week? I went to the gas station, not only get gas, but get a little bit something extra. How much are you spending those extras on, and take that into consideration. Also, I want to go deep as far as for in the future, the biggest expenses that you're going to have as far as for, if you do have a baby, are you going to have daycare costs? Is 1 or 2 people going to be out of work for a while? Is one person even going to go back to work at all? So, and then another thing to take into consideration as far as for hobbies. We all like camping, we all like going snowmobiling or motorcycling, or whatever it is, but those hobbies costs money. When you take a look at customers, you take a look at as far as what's their biggest budget, or where did they end up maybe going wrong if they run into issues. It's not budgeting for those extra items.
Have a thorough budget and proper representation, and you can be successful. Now, as a self-employed videographer, and we have a different set of rules, let's talk a little bit about what a mortgage looks like for somebody who's self-employed like myself, and what I have to do to qualify.
Gotcha. So let's go deep on that because there's qualification and there's also getting you personally prepared as far as for being self-employed. Let's talk about getting ready. So self-employment, guess what? It's up to you to get out of bed every day as far as for making sure can you make that income. You need to take in consideration as far as for taxes. So you want to get yourself a good accountant that's going to help you as far as you have to start paying quarterlies or you're going to do it every year. You want to make sure that you keep up on top of all the IRS rules and any unemployment rules if you do have employees as well. Then there's qualifying for it. At the end of the day, we want to take a look at as far as is your income stable when it comes to being self-employed. Lenders are going to want to see typically a 2-year income that's listed on your tax return as far as for qualifying. Some lenders are able to do 1 year if you were in your business for 5 years. As you can see, if you don't put a lot of income when you file your taxes, you're not going to be able to use a lot of income as far as for qualifying.
Being prepared, let's go into the being prepared part, is getting a accountant, getting another person on your team to make sure that your documentation is correct. And you can help guide through that process what they're going to need so that the income and all of those things come out right. When you're doing your business and you're running your business, you got to keep up on all the things and maybe pay a little bit more taxes so that you can have a little bit more income to get the loan that you want.
There is always that extra 2-year time period. If you're looking at purchasing a house and you're self-employed, you really need to take a look at, really what am I listing on my tax return so I can count that as far as for income going forward. So it has to be at least a 2-year window where you have to start looking at that ahead of time.
So there's a few steps in getting prepared to getting your offer accepted when you are self-employed. Do you have a success story for us?
There's many success stories as far as for self-employment. I think the biggest ones is as far as for being prepared, knowing what your taxes are, knowing your numbers, and not being afraid of it. Sometimes self-employed, they just want to do their business, and I get it, and I can respect that. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure the IRS is not on your tail, or you want to make sure that in essence that you're not having to pay more taxes than you need to.
Get your team prepared, get your taxes in order, and get your finances straight. We'll see you next week, Kris.
Thank you.
You know what I found interesting about Missy's information is that I didn't know a real estate agent couldn't tell people about the neighborhood and the schools and the crime rates.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole interesting sort of area of the law where you would assume you're getting information from your real estate agent that's relevant, but there are certain things, even on the offer to purchase, it talks about the buyer's obligation to look at the sex offender registry and all this stuff, because the real estate agent is barred from doing that.
I think that's one of the most valuable things I got out of this episode was learning that little bit of information that as a buyer, I'm really responsible for, understanding the location, understanding who my neighbors are, and making sure that that home is going to be something I want to live in for a long time.
It's a unique relationship, and it's a relationship where we build up a lot of trust with our real estate agent, and we should, but we have to understand that they're in some ways limited, and where in a way that if we were using our friend or our sister, they'd be able to tell us all these things, but they have constraints on them professionally that we have to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Keeping with our theme of Buyers 101 and making sure that our audience has everything they need to be successful in getting their offer accepted, what is something else that we could look at as far as the legal standing of purchasing this new home?
Sure. Well, purchasing a new home is a big deal, and a lot of people, I help people purchase their first home, and they'll say, wow, we really feel like adults now. We got a house. And the next thing they need to do as adults is they need to get an estate plan together. A lot of times people are purchasing a new home because they're starting a family or relocating. And if they have some kind of an estate plan, a will or a trust or something like that, it needs to be updated because probably your primary asset, if not one of your major assets, is being updated, is being changed. And if you don't have an estate plan, now's the time to do that because all of a sudden you've got an asset that's worth maybe $100,000 or $200,000 that you need to make clear what you want to have happen to in the event of your death, whether that's going to be divided up amongst children or relatives or whatever else it might be. Now's the time to look at those things because you've got some big pieces in the game that you need to manage.
Estate planning, especially if I'm my 30-year-old self, which is a few years ago, when I think of that, I probably wouldn't want to do that because that's way down the road. So I wouldn't want to bother with that. Is it expensive to do this? Does it take a long time? What's all involved?
Sure. What's involved typically, and I don't think my firm's much different than a lot, is you have to provide whatever lawyer you're talking to some basic information, who you are, what your sort of family situation is, and what you're thinking as far as how you'd like things to be distributed in the event of your death, and who you'd want making decisions for you in the event of your incompetence or your death. And that's the one that affects younger people more, because younger people get sick or get in car accidents, and you're going to want someone to be able to step in and manage your life for you if you're not able. I had a case recently where a kid who was 25 years old got ill and lost competence, was in a hospital for a couple weeks, and he didn't have any estate plan. So his parents, he wasn't married, his parents had to go into court and become his legal guardians in order to pay his mortgage and manage his affairs for him. And that was really a huge burden on them that didn't have to be if he would have had a basic estate plan done.
So if you're creating wealth by, getting one of these properties, getting your offer accepted, take the extra steps to make a will, make an estate plan, and have your team aligned so that you're protected.
Absolutely. And what you find is that, first of all, in doing an offer to purchase or buying a house, you're going to start meeting professionals, and you can either work with those professionals or get referrals. And then the other thing you realize is how intertwined a lot of these things are. We talked about title in another episode. How we own something might affect our estate plan, or what estate plan we have might affect how we own something. Maybe we're living with someone, or maybe we're newly married, and we need to think about, do we want to be joint tenants? What's going to happen in our will? Did someone give a big deposit? If we're living together, did my partner put a bunch of money down, and we want to make sure they get that out if something were to happen? All considerations that really intertwine, and if we try to not deal with all of them at the same time, there are sometimes pretty big gaps that appear in our plan.
And it's easier to resolve differences when you're getting along than when you're not getting along.
Absolutely. It's it might seem like an annoyance to work through these things now, but once we're at odds, once somebody moves out or somebody dies and now you're negotiating with your partner's family instead of your partner, it gets a lot more complicated, and feelings get a lot more hurt, and things get a lot more strained.
I had a family member say, this other family member who's related by marriage would take care of things, and that's never a good idea, right?
Right. Well, and it's funny that you'd use that phrase, because we hear that a lot, and you can mean 100 different things by take care of things. That might mean they get everything. That might mean they're in charge, but they don't get everything. That might mean they get a piece. We don't know what that means, and the legal reality is unless we have it written down and defined, doesn't mean anything. It just means you've given some people something to quote when they're all fighting with each other.
How do you approach a parent? A lot of us have parents out there, and they're like, they don't have that estate plan, but they think their kids or their spouse or their partner is going to take care of it. How do you approach that conversation?
Yeah, well, what I tell people is the comparison I make is talking to your parents or grandparents about their estate plan is kind of like talking to your teenagers about sex. It's an important conversation you got to have, and if you don't, they're going to get bad information from somewhere else and probably make bad decisions. So it's an important conversation, and really what you're trying to do in that conversation is empower them to say, Mom and Dad, I'm not trying to get an angle. I just want to know what you want so we can make sure it's going to happen. I had a case walk in my door last week where a person said, my dad's remarried, he's got some stepkids and a new wife, and he's got a will, and he wants to cut out one of my siblings, but he doesn't want to do anything to update his estate plan. And I had to inform them that if Dad didn't update his estate plan, he was going to have a colossal mess on his hand if Dad died, because it was going to go through the probate court, and that child that he wanted to disinherit was going to have rights to come into court and object. Whereas if Dad did a trust, everything was going to stay private and there wouldn't be this powder keg of problems ready to go off when Dad died.
Make sure that if you're talking to somebody about an estate plan and someone says, I'll take care of it, that might be a good opportunity for you to get some professionals on your side to make sure that you're taken care of.
Absolutely. Take control of your situation and get it in writing now.
Thanks so much for stopping by, Al.
Thanks.
Missy, Kris, and Al really gave us a lot to work with on getting our offer accepted and getting out there with the most amount of knowledge and having the best team around us. This was a very informative episode, and I really appreciate all of them stopping by to help all of us get our offer accepted. Join us next week where we talk about affordable options for buying a new home, particularly new construction. Missy has some wonderful homes that she's building, and she actually put a house onto a foundation a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to show that to you in next week's episode. Again, this episode is brought to you by HomeWire.com. Missy and her team are here to help you get your offer accepted. Their information's below, and we look forward to having you connect with them. See you next week on the Offer Accepted Show.